Screenplay.
Hello and welcome to Screen Slurps, the movie review podcast where we discuss the good, the bad, and the savage in the world of cinema. I'm Adam Meisner.
And I'm Laura Herlocker.
And this week we are taking it to the Great Blue Sea with our wonderful discussion, interpretation, say what you will, of the brand new film, The Whale.
You know what I just realized? Isn't the movie set in Idaho?
I believe so,
That's
yes.
nowhere near the ocean.
But it is
So
near,
it is.
It's near a bunch of potatoes.
Idaho potatoes, the best potatoes.
Could they name a whale after some potatoes?
This is my orca whale named Tater.
My potato whale.
But I was just thinking, part of me felt like it was kind of like a seaside-y town, but obviously it couldn't have been if it was set in Idaho, so.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a nice interpretation of a potato name for a whale, the potato or something.
Tater.
I don't know.
Just Tater.
Just the tater?
Yeah.
Come here, tater. And then,
What? That was like a dog. That wasn't a whale.
They have those whale noises like.
Well, yeah, haven't you seen, I was about to say, like Finding Nemo when Dory's like, I can speak whale.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Come here, tater.
You start doing a dog bellow.
It's almost the same thing. Come on. And then I think I'm going to go into a dolphin noise or something.
I can't do that. I keep trying and I just can't do it.
It's not even close to as high-pitched of a noise as a dolphin noise,
No.
though. It's still in the low, like, baritone dolphins here. I imagine a choir of dolphins like, all right, and the baritone section.
Despite this conversation and the title of the movie, there are no aquatic animals in this film.
Listener discretion is advised. Yeah, we're talking about The Whale this week. And boy, was I excited to see this movie when we went and just caught the film. And keyword there was excited to see this movie. I'm still very, I'm pleased to be talking about it.
We'll get into it.
Yeah.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Excuse me for, jumping right in there. But, before we talk the details about The Whale, we are going to be talking a little bit about some things we've been doing before we get into the nitty-gritty all about the Whale film. Some of the things we've been doing, like catching some other television shows, maybe some other films, maybe some other random mumbo-jumbo, like the sea creatures we were just talking about. I haven't been to an aquarium in so long. I don't know if there's any new aquatic life that even dwell out there other than whales and dolphins. What is going on in the world? Are there any scientists that listen to our show that can tell me if there's new aquatic life that are just blossoming out there?
The ocean is so deep we can't even go that deep. There's got to be more life down there that we don't know about.
It sounds like we're about almost talking about space at this point.
I mean, it's the opposite, but yeah.
I know, instead
opposite
of going
direction.
up, we can't go down that far. Laura, have you been to that far into the aquatic system yet?
No, I don't like open water, so I avoid it. I don't like swimming in open water. It scares me because there is so much that we don't know that lives down there. So
I'm curious to find out. I'll have to put on the Discovery Channel.
We'll go watch My Teacher the Octopus or whatever that documentary is again. Anyway. Side slurps. So listeners, as you've noticed, it's been a while since we made an episode. We took a little break. But because of that, we got tons of side slurps, but I'm going to narrow it down to the important stuff. So, TV, movies. As it is the holiday season, Adam and I did watch Spirited, the new Scrooge or Christmas Carol movie starring Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell.
Don't be confused like I first was when Laura brought up watching Spirited, and I thought she meant the animated film about horses.
Spirit. The horse. I don't think I've seen that probably since it came out. And
I guess we'll have to go watch it.
I guess we need to watch Spirit now. No, we watched Spirited, which is like a modern retelling, like I said, of A Christmas Carol. It was okay. It was a Christmas movie, quintessential happy Christmas movie.
Yeah.
I don't know, Adam, do you have anything else to say about it really? It's just
it's in my opinion, the standard Ryan Reynolds, Will Ferrell, put them together in a box, and you get what you
do
get.
kind of like the modern take they took on the story, though. That was interesting.
I suppose so. Yeah.
And, well, listeners, maybe this isn't a good review.
Yeah. It was just kind of the classic Will Ferrell.
It is what it is.
Hey, we can all be happy. Let's all have a good time, and we can make things okay again. Let's go do that. And then, you have the scenes with Ryan Reynolds where, Ryan Reynolds, he's a bad man. He's not the good guy that you want to be. And then as you continue to watch it, it's kind of trying to figure out, well, why is that? Why is he? And
it's a musical.
And it's a musical. So that's kind of where the fun comes in, is that you get these musical scenes.
Yeah. I don't know that I would watch it again, though.
Right.
So that's my take on it. Otherwise, I have finally, it's taken me forever, but I finally am watching Midnight Mass. I just have one episode left, which is the Netflix series written by Mike Flanagan. We've done an episode on Hush, the Mike Flanagan movie. So this is just another kind of part in the Flanagan universe. I will say I'm kind of disappointed with Midnight Mass. Everyone was obsessed with it, I feel like, when it came out and was talking about how good it is. But it's just, I don't think anything can live up to Haunting of Hill House for me. So all of his other stuff has kind of been a bit disappointing. On the book front, I've watched, I can't watch books. I've read quite a few books. The current obsession, thanks to my sister, is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. She also wrote Akatar, which I've talked about before in here. But Throne of Glass is her earlier series that's been completed. I just read book 3, and I am absolutely obsessed. So I highly suggest it. Is such a good series. So good. And right now, I am currently reading Saga, the graphic novel. I'm kind of going through the first compendium, which I think is the first 50-some chapters. I will say it's not what I was expecting, and it is quite interesting. Adam's kind of glanced at some of the pages while I've been reading, and yeah.
With Saga?
Yeah.
Yeah. It took me by surprise when I looked over. I was thinking, that's not what I was expecting. Maybe I just didn't read enough of the synopsis to realize what was going to be going on.
I don't know. It's not what I was expecting either.
It certainly wasn't what I was expecting.
It's good, though. It's really interesting. Again, it's just interesting future sci-fi world that, I don't know, I'm kind of digging. And then just the last thing, just my fun little hobby thing. Adam's mom and dad were nice enough to gift me a sewing machine for Christmas. So I've been playing around with that. I actually made myself a dress that I wore when we went and saw the whale. So I'm making use of my Christmas gifts. So go me.
You made a very nice looking dress, and I'm curious to see what other kind of stuff you can put together. I'm
excited to see what else I can make. We're gonna have to go shopping for patterns, Adam, so we can make things.
Oh boy.
And I'm gonna stop myself there. I think there's lots of things we've been doing over these past few weeks, but I think those are the ones I really wanted to pinpoint.
Well, some of the side slurps I've been up to this past week, they all kind of coincide. Not all of them coincide necessarily, but a good handful of them kind of go together. So I read all of the Stephen King novel Carrie, and that was one I've been wanting to read for quite some time now. But the interesting thing is that book was the first one that Stephen King had released. And that's really what sort of piqued my interest, was that it was the first novel he had released, and that I wanted to read that before I actually watched the classic 1976 film that was an adaptation by director Brian De Palma of the book. And so I figured, you know what, I'll read the book before I watch the movie, and I feel like a sinner a little bit for not having seen that film yet. And I do love the movies that Brian De Palma has directed.
You're not a big horror guy, though, so it's really not that surprising.
I just feel like I'm lagging a little bit on seeing that movie, though. So whether or not I watch a lot of horror films, it's still...
It's De Palma.
It's still Brian De Palma. And I'm like, man, I got to catch up on
Who's the actress? So. It's Sissy Spacek? Is that right? Or am I making that up?
I think you may be right.
We're going to say I'm right.
But yeah, I'm excited to be able to just watch that movie and have have read all of the book now and just try and be able to see how the screenplay and how the film adaptation compares to what I've read in that novel now. I'm really curious to see how the two kind of coincide with one another. On the flip side of that, I just watched the film The Green Mile again. That's an adaptation of a Stephen King novel.
Yeah, you are on
And-
a sting kick. Sting the police. A king kick.
Yeah, and so now it's like a backwards comparison. Now I watched the movie before having read the book. So now, after seeing The Green Mile, I've got to go and read the book. I got to go read the Stephen King book and see how that compares. And I'm really curious to see how the book reads out in comparison to the movie that was made as an adaptation of the Stephen King novel. It's really interesting to see how these movies kind of come together after Stephen King has written a novel, and to see the amount of movies that have been made after Stephen King has put these books out. Because let's be real here, Stephen King, he's a great author.
I feel like he's got to be like the author with the most adaptations of his work.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's anyone else that does kind of reach his level.
Right.
Like, I honestly feel like he's got to be one of the top ones.
I mean, it really says something. And the first thing I thought of, it probably doesn't even touch the amount of Stephen King movies that are out there, but maybe like Tom Clancy or something, like the amount of war movies that are out there.
Yeah. But like you said, I don't know if it would touch King though, but you're right. We'll have to Google this later. Now I'm interested.
Yeah. Or there's the author that you and I are into, the it doesn't wouldn't touch Stephen King, but the murder mystery.
Oh, like Agatha Christie?
Yeah, Agatha Christie.
Oh, there's probably a lot of her stuff too, though. A lot of like BBC pieces.
So, yeah, things to think about. But certainly, Stephen King, a lot of originality with the work that he puts out. Of course, he's got a style to the kinds of things that he makes, but even still, I would say there's a lot of diversity to be had with the work I've seen that he does, and it makes me want to read his books now. I don't read enough books, and now I'm going to start with reading a lot of Stephen King, I guess. So,
though I got you a Douglas Adams book, you can read that.
I'm going to read that too. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and then I'll have to watch the movie too. It's just it's going to be a 2023 reading spree with me now, I think.
Ooh.
Going off of
Are you going to set a number on Goodreads?
I already did that for this year, and I totally failed. So, yeah.
We'll just set a realistic one for next year.
Yeah, I'm really going to have
10.
to hit that number.
I think you should go for 10.
It's because I get caught in the moment with many other things.
Yeah.
So, going off of that, another thing that I've been really into for this coming year is really getting into engineering and constructing robotic things, electric things, really getting into like wiring and building and stuff like that. So Laura and I both really got into watching the television show BattleBots. I'm surprised that's even still a television show. Should I be surprised? It's an exciting show to watch. It's fun to just watch people building these robots that fight one another.
Oh, it's great.
And yeah, it's just, I think it's funny to see some of the builds that some of the people do. One of the episodes we watched recently, there was a robot that looked like a hamburger. And
oh, that's right. And it was like a play on Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, the Battle Royale with cheese.
You know what the French call a quarter pounder with cheese? A French Royale with cheese.
It's just Royale with cheese.
Whatever. I was close enough. Give me the points for half of the quote.
And I also thought recently that why don't I just build my own keyboard as well while I'm at it? So I got really into looking up all these different types of keyboards I could build, customize the keycaps, things like that. That's a basic way to start building things of my own. So I just ordered a keyboard to start building on. And that should be coming shortly, that I could get my own custom keycaps for, things like that. So keeping it simple there, but I will be working on some other projects on the side very soon. So those are some of my side slurps for this past week.
Do you want to know the list of authors with the most adaptations?
Go for it.
So we were pretty spot on. Agatha Christie is one of the top ones, as is Stephen King. It also lists Mark Twain, which I kind of find surprising. And then Jane Austen, which again makes sense. You know, there's a lot of adaptations of her books. And Ian Fleming, again, making sense. There's James Bond's. So
Absolutely.
those are kind of like this one article is saying some of the top ones. I would say like Doyle probably too, who wrote Sherlock Holmes. There's a lot of adaptations of Sherlock Holmes.
Well, other than the side slurps for this past week, I do have a couple things in the film news for this past week to report. One a little more newsy than the other article I found, but they're both very much news to report. And I'll start with the one that's a little more top tier news related, which is very, I'm not going to say surprising. It's really not a surprise to me, but it's still very much like, wow, I am very, anyways, so the BBC reports that the new Avatar film, Avatar: The Way of Water, has surpassed $1 billion in the global box office in just 14 days.
Ugh, why? People, why? Why you want to go sit through that boring-ass movie about blue people?
Well, why would you say that? Because the first one did
was
extremely well.
But it was boring. You honestly like Avatar?
Oh, I don't have a comment for that because I haven't seen the second one yet.
I would rather watch the horrible live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I haven't seen the first Avatar since it came out. I watched the first one in theaters, and I don't think I rewatched it though. I think I went and saw it in theaters.
It was like
and that was
very pretentious and long and boring.
And did you only watch it once?
No, I'm pretty sure I've seen it like 2 or 3 times.
Oh, yeah. See, I think I only watched the movie once, and I'm not saying that because I thought that the movie was bad. It's just like I went and saw the movie because it was gaining so much hype, and because it was gaining hype, then obviously, like any kind of moral standard, when something gains that much hype, then you of course are going to think, well, it must be exciting, I should go and see this. And then me and I think some college friends were like, yeah, let's go see Avatar. And then we went and saw it, and yeah, then I don't know if I ever talked about it again after that. You know, it was one of those kind of movies.
Again, it's pretentious.
But I've heard good things about the new one though. I've seen articles online stating that this one is so much better than the first one. I think I've had friends that have also said online that this is much better than the first one. Is that going to be enough to inspire me to want to go see it in theaters? I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure if we've crossed that line.
Maybe we'll use the movie pass so it's cheap.
I don't know if I want to make that judgment call yet of me wanting to go see the new Avatar just yet, but maybe I'll cross that ground soon. I'm just not sure yet, but we'll have to see. In other news, I have read online from an article from Benzinga that apparently the character Miles Braun from the new film Glass Onion may have been inspired by Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think that's apparently I think that's a thing.
Yeah, I guess in the article it's reported that Rian Johnson told Wired, the other company or so, that news source, that he wrote the screenplay during COVID-19 lockdowns prior to Musk announcing plans to purchase Twitter. And the movie director joked that he didn't know about this ahead of time, but viewers could see parallels between the behavior of the tech billionaires, both fictional and in real life.
I mean, it makes sense. I can see it. I saw a really interesting thing that was showing a side-by-side comparison of one of the scenes from Glass Onion with Edward Norton against Tom Cruise in Steel Magnolias, and like how similar it was when he's giving his like self-help talk. Remember, he's in that like vest and has the ponytail. Tom Cruise in Steel Magnolias, and he's doing that whole thing, and it was like side-by-side comparison with one of the flashback scenes of Edward Norton in the bar with the group of friends. And I was like, they do look very similar. Like Glass Onion, I guess, is just full of all these little Easter eggs that people have been kind of mentioning and showing on TikTok. So,
yeah, that's interesting. Do you mean
Oh, I mean Magnolia.
Magnolia?
Yeah, I said
I was
Steel
like-
Magnolias. Steel Magnolias is that movie with like Sally Field.
Yeah, Steel Magnolias is a bunch of old women.
Yeah, it's Sally. I think it's Sally Field and some other people. I meant Magnolia by PTA.
Yeah.
Is that why you were looking at me?
I was trying to think. I'm like Steel Magnolias.
Sorry, their names are very similar. Don't laugh at me. They are Steel Magnolia versus Magnolia. So yes, I meant the PTA film, not the old ladies.
Tom Cruise and Betty White. Anyways, so let's talk about the film of the week. The film that we are talking about this week is none other than The Whale, directed by Darren Aronofsky, screenplay by Samuel D. Hunter, based upon the play The Whale by Samuel D. Hunter, produced by Jeremy Dawson, Ari Handel, and Darren Aronofsky, starring Brendan Fraser, Sadie Sink, Hong Chow, Ty Simpkins, Samantha Morton, and I'm going to say potentially a couple other people. Really,
But
that's
really,
the entire
that's it.
cast.
Maybe the
Maybe
delivery
the
driver.
pizza delivery driver.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think he's the only other one.
And cinematography by Matthew Libatique, edited by Andrew Weisblum, music by Rob Simonson. The film was distributed by A24, and currently The Whale is hitting the box office around $3.6 million. That is the revenue that they are currently around. So, the plot for The Whale, just to give you an idea of what this film is about, if you have not seen it, if you're not sure what The Whale is about, the story follows a 600-pound reclusive English teacher, Charlie, performed by Brendan Fraser, who has decided to eat himself to death. Charlie's pain and misery comes from the abandonment and death of his gay lover, which leads to his chronic binge eating. So, yeah, let's go over this.
I don't know how I feel about that plot synopsis.
I mean, that was
No, that is what happens, but just like, I don't know. It's so much more than that. It's like, it's also about him being estranged from his family and him, like, you know, in his relationship with religion and with the missionary and his relationship with Liz. And yeah, there's just one of the plot summaries. Well, the plot summary thing from IMDb literally just says like, a reclusive English teacher attempts to reconnect with his estranged daughter. And reading that before going to see this movie, I was like, oh, well, this, okay. And afterwards, I'm like, that is like one tiny part of this movie.
Right.
There's so much more that happens in this. Like, that plot does not do justice to what actually, or that synopsis does not give justice to like what actually happens in this film.
Right. Well, I would say that the synopsis that I just read is a good way to lead into what you're going to watch as the film starts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you were looking up a synopsis of this film and you begin to watch the film, it's a good introductory statement to what you're going to see. You're kind of trying to understand what is this movie about? What are you going to see? If all you knew about this film was what I had just stated, and then you go see the movie, that's a great opener for what you're about to see. But what we're about to discuss about this movie, there is much more that happens that evolves out of that.
I do think I disagree, though, with the part that says that he is eating himself to death, like decides to eat himself to death. We can talk about that more.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can.
But yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good... It gives you a good idea of exactly what's happening. So yes, we have Charlie. He is a very obese man who is reclusive and stays in his home, teaches courses online, and kind of his downfall began, not downfall, but this like depression and spiral began years before when he fell in love with a man and left his wife and young daughter to be with him. And then his partner kind of went through this whole religious trauma and kind of went on a downward spiral and committed suicide. And that then, again, on top of the already like the fact that he left his family, Charlie then has to deal with that. And he's just coping with all of that depression by eating, which has made him a very large man and has caused him to have these like health problems and is dying. So yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot that does go down in this movie, as you were mentioning. So I find it very interesting that this movie opens up with, you know, him on his couch. He, as a college instructor, he's keeping his camera off as he's teaching these students. One of the first things that we notice as he's teaching his class is one of the students asking, when are you going to get the camera fixed? Because as we continue to realize, he's never shown himself to his students. And it's an interesting thought that he would never show himself to his students.
Well, if he's, you know, embarrassed or ashamed by the way he looks and he doesn't want, or he doesn't, not even that he's embarrassed or ashamed, but he doesn't want the way he looks to impact how the students feel about him.
Right.
You know, like, because it shouldn't. Like, this is one of the bad things in our society, and something we're going to talk about in a lot more detail, I think, because it's one of the big criticisms about this film. But essentially, it's just that, you know, being obese or overweight is seen as like being less than, you know, like fat people are looked down upon, and we're seen as grotesque, and, you know, like less than. It's just another form of, I don't know what I'm trying to, like another form of something, but and so I think that's playing into this opening scene and the reason that he's not showing himself, because he doesn't want his students to see him as less than. He wants them to think of him as, you know, their professor, this who's helping them write and teaching them about this, and not joke on the side and be like, oh, look at this guy.
Right. And if people are doing that, then clearly they're just assholes. I'm just going to say that if he were to have his camera on.
The world is assholes. And that's exactly what happens later in the movie. Like, as we're jumping ahead, when he finally does show himself, you can see all of the students are like making faces. They're taking pictures of him with their phone. Like, he's a spectacle. You know, this whole idea of like obesity being a spectacle and less than and being other. Like, that's exactly what we see. And that's exactly what happens. And that's because the world, not everyone is nice.
Right. Not everyone, no.
There's good people in this world. I mean, I'm not shitting on everyone, but
I think to see that in this movie, it's just trying to prove a point that not everyone, correct. Like, there are people, it's not showing every single person taking pictures or being like, we're all assholes here.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it is a statement that we do live in a world where there are people that are like that have that mentality that it's like, there's going to be that person that's like, I'm that jerk that's like flabbergasted that like that person looks that way. And it's like, you don't have to be that guy.
No, but it's so upsetting that does happen in real life. I mean, there's been studies shown that, so in the movie, as we're just kind of talking about it, Charlie, his like friend and caretaker named Liz, she keeps trying to get him to go to the hospital because he's dying. Like, he has congestive heart failure. He's dying. And he keeps saying, no, I can't go to the hospital. I don't have the money to pay for it. And we find out that's really not true. But there's been this study that shows that a lot of people who are obese do not like going to the doctor because doctors look down on people who are fat, you know, and don't give them the proper care all of the time or help them as much as they would healthy people. And so that's like, studies have shown that's true. So a lot of people who are obese do refuse to go see a doctor because they don't want to have that stigma or that, you know, put upon them.
That's an interesting thought to think about too, because I think it kind of coincides a little bit with what you were saying about how the synopsis I read earlier stating that this had mentioned he has decided to eat himself to death. I mean, in a way, I think this plot synopsis saying this movie follows a 600-pound reclusive English teacher who has decided to eat himself to death. Sort of in a sense, like, he has the money to take care of himself. He could have gone to the hospital.
Right, but
so
depression does things to you.
As an interpretation, in a way, he sort of is eating himself to death if he can afford to take care of himself. But on the flip side of that, if he is thinking that the doctors aren't going to take care of him as well. Like, I think it's really,
I get what you're saying.
You got to interpret it how you want.
I think my interpretation is just that he hasn't decided to eat to kill himself. He's eating to cope with the depression and the trauma that he has in his life. And it's just an effect of that is that he is dying.
Right.
Like, I don't think he sat there and was like, you know what? I'm going to eat a shit ton of food so I die.
No,
like,
I agree.
I think that's just my way that it was worded and my interpretation of it. I don't feel like that's what he's consciously doing. It's what he perhaps is subconsciously doing.
Right. Yeah, I think so as well. And, I think in some ways he's still trying to take care of himself in his apartment. He just doesn't want to be with the doctors at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we can see that as the movie progresses, he's being taken care of by Liz at his apartment, and he just doesn't want her to know about the money he has because he wants to use that for his daughter. We find out about that as the movie progresses as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we can also see, there's a clear scene at one point where he's at his countertop in the kitchen, which it also becomes a very graphic scene with food. But he's at his countertop. He's got one drawer full of, tools and things to basically take care of himself, and another.
Well, it was like empty, and there was like one granola bar, right? Like some kind of health bar in the drawer.
And then he's got another drawer that's just full of candy, Three Musketeer bars and things like that.
Of course, you eye in on those Three Musketeer bars because those are your favorite.
Hey, I do love Three Musketeer bars, but it doesn't even mean that the scene brought me enjoyment just because it was Three Musketeer bars. The scene didn't necessarily bring me enjoyment. I'm going to be blunt about that. It's just like I do like Three Musketeer bars, but I mean, it was a very intense scene because what is going on is he's got his laptop there. He's looking up the specifics of congestive heart failure and what that does to a person, like
how long he has to live.
Yeah, how long he has to live, what he could do for congestive heart failure or what can be done for it. And it's not exactly something he could fix on his own in his home, but he's kind of Googling what the deals are with congestive heart failure, what are the symptoms and what the feelings are. And as he's doing that, he is starting to decide whether or not he should eat that Three Musketeer bar. He kind of unwraps it,
stops,
puts it back. He's going to pull it back out. He puts it back in. And then finally he decides, after looking at enough about congestive heart failure, he's just going to go to town on him. He just eats one. He starts to put another one in his mouth. And then I'm not sure if it was the same scene or not, but there was the scene where he is just going through everything in that kitchen.
I think that was a different scene. That's later on.
Oh, okay.
But I think that scene though with the candy bar was so interesting because I feel like that's something a lot of people experience who have addictions. So it's not always food, right? But think of people who are addicted to drugs. They have that same thing, right? You're like, you shouldn't do it deep down. Like, it's not good for you. And you're like, okay, I'm going to stop. I need to stop. But at the same time, it's like, you can't walk away from it. So you keep doing drugs or you keep eating the candy. Like you keep just indulging and taking all this in, even though it's not good for you and you want to stop. It's just like, you can't. I think that scene was just really interesting in that regard, thinking of people with other types of addiction as well. I mean, because eating is an addiction. Like for him, it definitely was an addiction. He was using it to cope. And he was doing it to an excess that was not good for his body.
Absolutely. And we see that in another scene, too, when the nurse is at his house and she's trying to take care of him. She's warning him of his symptoms that he has as she's taking care of him through numerous scenes. But in one particular earlier scene, she's explaining that, again, in multiple scenes, she's explaining like he needs to go to a hospital. He needs to be seen by a doctor. And he will constantly come back at her with, he doesn't have the money for it. He's going to go in debt. He can't do that. And he kind of comes back at her in the scene that I'm talking about with that he needs to bring him like the food that he's requesting. Mm-hmm. And then she's kind of reluctant to do so at first, but then finally just caves and is like, okay, fine, and brings him this giant bucket of fried chicken.
I thought her character, Liz, was so interesting because, most addicts do have an enabler, right? And that's who she was. She was his enabler. Like, yes, she's trying to take care of him, and she like goes off and yells at him, and she's like, "You're dying. Like, why are you doing this to me?" Because we learn later on that she is the sister of his dead partner, and so they have like this really close relationship. And she's asking him like, "How can you make me go through this again? Right? Like, I lost my brother. Now I'm going to lose you." And so she knows what he's doing to himself is horrible. I mean, she's a nurse, so she really knows. But at the same time, like, she is his enabler. She brings him food. She like helps him. She, it's so hard. It's such an interesting character. And I thought the actress was so good at kind of playing that character too, and how she could like change like on a dime, right? From being like yelling and angry and upset with him to then instantly being like, "But you still are my friend and I care about you. And, if this makes you happy, I guess I'm going to help like do it for you."
And it's nice to see the ups and downs of each character, as each character should have sort of an up and down side on both of them. But to see with Liz, she's got these pleasantries to her of taking care of Charlie, but also she's smoking cigarettes too. So she's a nurse, but she's also smoking cigarettes by the window. And, she's clearly got a dark side to her. Not necessarily that she's evil or anything, but clearly she's got some hardships to her. And when we get introduced to
Ellie?
to Thomas, randomly enough, he's coming over to share the word of God to Charlie, and he's trying to get Charlie to hear about the word of new life and convert
like a
Charlie.
fundamentalist church, essentially.
Yeah. And that totally disgusts Liz in the beginning of the film, and she's explaining to him, "We don't want to hear anything about the New Life Church, and you need to get out of here immediately." Charlie's a little bit more pleasant about it, but still it's, a little strange that he's coming over there. And so that sort of goes throughout the film, that Thomas is still coming over, still trying to talk to Charlie, and it's a little weird how he's coming in and out of the movie.
Yeah. But also they kind of make it make sense, because you can tell Ellie, so we haven't even talked about Ellie yet, but Charlie's daughter, who he's trying to reconnect with before he dies, she comes over to his place and she meets Thomas, and you can tell she's like antagonizing him and like flirting with him. And so part of me is like, well, Thomas kept coming because he was hoping to see Ellie, but also hoping to save Charlie.
Yeah. And
I would have never let a missionary in my house. When people used to come knock on my doors as a kid, I would like slink down on the floor off of the couch and hide. Me and my sister, we laugh about this all the time. We would hide from people knocking at the door.
You couldn't just tell them no?
No, I don't want them to know I'm there. You gotta slink down and hide. I still do that. Weird. Whenever anyone knocks at our door, I hide.
You wouldn't just go over there and be like, get out?
No.
You scaredy cat.
But yeah, so I mean, as we were just talking about, so Liz, such an interesting character. Thomas, who we started talking about, the missionary, we learn even he has like a dark side, right? We learned that he's actually not from the church. He was in a church at his former home and was like smoking a lot of pot, and he stole and he got in trouble and he ran away from home. And now he's here just trying to like do his own thing and save people his own way. And then obviously we have Ellie, who's like such a pivotal character in this, because, it's kind of Charlie's life revolves around her at this point in his final days. He's doing what he can to make sure that she's like a good human, and that like that one line where he's like breaking down crying, and he's like, I just want to, essentially he's saying like, I want to know that I created like one good thing in this life, and being Ellie. And it's just like, oh my gosh.
And then Ellie is just rebelling at school and flunking out of classes.
She's struggling. I mean, you have to think of it from her point of view. She resents her dad. She resents Charlie because he left her like when she was 8, right? I think that's what she was saying. He just left and to be with his partner, and wasn't able to really connect or talk to her or see her like in the years between how years, however long it's been. And she's like, so why now suddenly do you want to be part of my life when you've wanted nothing to do with me? Right. And Charlie tries to be like, well, I ask your mother all the time. Like I send you money. But from Ellie's point of view and even mine, right. Like, but that's not trying. Like you weren't trying to actually be part of her life. You could have talked to her, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So she obviously resents him for that. And she's rebelling and taking that out. And so she's kind of seen as like, I mean, even her own mother says that she's evil.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but deep down we're learning, and Charlie's starting to learn that like she's not, though. She's a good person underneath it all. It's just she's dealing with some shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think what's so interesting too is, so this, as we said, it's based on a play written by Samuel D. Hunter. I think the play was written in like 2012, and a lot of it actually is kind of inspired by Hunter's own life. So, you know, him dealing with being like a closeted gay kid, attending a fundamentalist like church school in rural Idaho. Like that's something that Hunter actually dealt with. And he himself, I guess, dealt with like self-medicating with food to deal with his depression. And so a lot of this is kind of like stems from Hunter's own experience. And he just poured that into the play. And I think that's seen because of Charlie's character. Like you can definitely tell that it comes from a place of reality and like experienced realness.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty intense to see all of that wind out visually in this film, and especially with the way Brendan Fraser is portraying it all in this character. I think I think the way that Brendan Fraser performs as this character, it's
amazing.
I think it's nice to not nice to see, but I mean, like, I just think his acting performance is it keeps you engaged.
Brendan Fraser is seems like such a good human being also. So you just want to root for him. And then the fact that he played this so well, like it just, and I think this leads us really into a really good conversation, like a good segue, kind of talking about how a play has been adapted into a film. And I was watching an interview with Hunter and Fraser, and Hunter was saying, you know, one of the things that he kind of changed from the stage adaptations to a film is that he was able to actually like take out dialogue because he had close-ups of Brendan Fraser and how he was able to like emote and show feelings like through his eyes. He didn't always have to then have the dialogue. Like, for example, when he decides to call Ellie and, you know, like reconnect with her, there's actual dialogue that happens in the play, like the stage version, that they don't use in the film. They just kind of do a close up on Charlie's face, and we can kind of get like what's happening through that emotion. And I think that's so interesting to think about because it's so true, right? Like in a stage adaptation, your audience is far away.
Right.
You can't see that emotion as much, which is why stage like acting sometimes has to be like very over dramatic, like so that you get that across. And in films, it can be like such a small, like nuanced little thing, but it will come across like so loudly in film. And I think Brendan Fraser, just the way that he does this and the emotion that we do see, like not only in his eyes, but in the way he moves his body, like the pain, the strength it takes for him to like move around and do things. I just found it to be so interesting.
Right. Yeah.
One of the other, sorry, as I keep going,
No.
One of the other interesting things too is like, I was reading for a lot of the stage adaptations, they'll make the set in such a way that his apartment feels like very claustrophobic, and it makes him seem even larger, right? Like, so like larger than life in this small space. And I feel like they did the same thing in the movie. Like his apartment kind of is its own character. And it does give you this bit of like a claustrophobic feel because the whole movie does take place essentially in one room. And it's like dark and, you know, it's mostly him like on a couch. And I feel like you get that same sort of like claustrophobic enclosed vibe. And you can feel how that's like pressing down on everyone as well and kind of building up tensions between all the characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to see, again, the progression of this movie with Charlie and Ellie. He's just looking to connect with his daughter. So much so that he's telling her that he'll pay her $120,000 essentially. He'll give her all that money and write her essays for her if she just spends time with him, essentially. And it's a pretty big statement to spend time with your estranged daughter, essentially.
Yeah.
So
Well, again, he's just wanting to know that he's created something good,
yeah.
And I feel like, and he has this idea of her, right? Because he hasn't spoken to her or spent time with her in a long time, but he has this essay, which I think is important for us to talk about because it gives the movie, the play, its title. So he got this essay that Ellie had written as a kid that's on Moby Dick. It's like a book review on Moby Dick. And he's just like, to him, it's like the best written essay he's ever read, right? Like he has people read it to him when he's like going through like a heart attack, it like calms him down. Like he just thinks it's this beautiful piece of writing, and it's not in reality, right? Like it's not good writing.
And as a viewer, we just hear
the
missionary
same lines
read it in the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
He reads it to Charlie in the very beginning of this movie, and the missionary Thomas is asking, why did you have me read that?
Why am I reading this?
And Charlie explains that he teaches a college English class, and so that's kind of what we're thinking. Oh, it must have been one of the students who wrote that paper.
But we learned it was Ellie, and he's just held on to it all this time, and it's given him a sense of comfort. And I mean, he even like repeats lines to himself as he's just like walking around his apartment, But I think, so the essay, why we get the title of The Whale, right, is this idea that like Moby Dick, and he's chasing after this whale, and the like fragility of life or something, and the way that like Brendan Fraser repeats the lines as he's like walking around shirtless in his apartment is giving the idea that like he is the whale, right? Like I don't know, it's interesting that they focus that's like the point that the movie revolves around.
Yeah, I mean, Brendan Fraser is, or Charlie, I should say, is kind of seeing himself as the whale. Like, he is the Moby Dick of the story, and kind of relating himself to that sort of focus. But at the same time, his focus is just so much on that story and the fact that he got that piece of writing from her as a kid. And with that in mind, I think he's just so focused on the fact that he has that piece of writing that when she's coming over all these times and he keeps asking her to work on her essays and her writing and things like that, and she keeps denying that she's going to work on any of it, I think that really sticks with his character. I mean, it's hard to even think about that when you're watching this movie, that he would have that kind of mentality, because you're thinking about all the other aspects of this, like his health and
but he's
his
just
relationship.
so focused on
but
her.
It's like, you got to think about the fact that she wrote that essay. He got that as a gift, or something that he received in the mail from his ex-wife, and now he's got this thought process as a college English professor that his daughter can write. She has the talent of writing. And he's telling that to her as she comes over, and she's trying to deny all of that because she doesn't have this relationship with her father anymore. She's thinking, I don't want to talk to you. You're this horrible person. Why do you even care? And she doesn't realize that he's been so focused on this essay that he's owned for years, and he's been thinking about her all of this time. He knows that she has this talent, and he's trying to tell her, like, you are gifted. You are wonderful. You are an incredible person, and I want you to understand that. And I'm pretty sure he pretty much says those kinds of lines as she's over at his
he's
place.
like, you are amazing.
Yeah.
That's what he keeps saying, just like, you're amazing. He always sees the good in people. He's very much an optimist, Charlie. And he even has that line where he's just like, people are incapable of not caring. Like, people may seem like they don't, but they care about something. Everyone cares about something. And he can tell that Ellie cares about something, though she may not be like putting it out there. There's something that she's like grasping onto. And he finds that amazing. He finds her amazing. Kind of going along that lines with you talking about how Charlie sees her as like this great writer. I was watching, and again, an interview with Hunter and Fraser, and the interviewer asked Hunter if he had thought about like what happens to Ellie after the play. And he was very much like, no, I don't want to put out there what could be after, because I want the audience to have their own ideas, to be ambiguous so that people can interpret it their own ways. And Brendan Fraser, like, I feel like he embodied Charlie so much. Brendan Fraser was like, oh no, Ellie becomes a writer. Like, he had this whole thing. He was like, she was writing the haiku. Like, she's a great writer. Charlie knew it. She becomes a writer. She writes about her experiences. And it's just so interesting that like Brendan Fraser kind of takes on that same idea you were just talking about of how Charlie feels towards Ellie.
Mm-hmm. I feel like he must have instilled some kind of thought process in her to like say that, especially with thinking about him telling her at the end of the movie or giving her that essay at the end of the movie, because with this discussion in mind of him telling her that he's going to write her essays for her, and near the end of the movie, as things to be starting to, things are hitting the fan here near the end of the movie, he's getting very sick and things are problematic. And to kind of rewind and then bounce back here, when we rewind to the beginning of the movie, Liz is telling Charlie that with his health going the way it is, he's probably not going to live near the end of the weekend, or by the weekend, I should say. And as the movie progresses, you can see in, I believe, the bottom right-hand corner, the days of the week pop up throughout different scenes. So one scene, it might say Monday, and then time goes by, and then we see Tuesday. So as the movie progresses, we start to get closer and closer to the weekend. Well, sure enough, by the end of the movie, it's the weekend. And so you start to think, you're like, it's going to be getting grim here pretty soon.
Well, you can just tell, too, he's like deteriorating as the days go on.
And near the end of the movie, of course, Ellie, she comes over and she's getting into this feud with her dad, and things are not going good with Thomas either. Not between the two of them, but Thomas and Charlie kind of go at it between one another, because they've got this whole problem where Thomas comes over and he's telling Charlie that, I think the reason things went sour between you and your partner were because, this part of the Bible that's highlighted here, it's because God didn't want you two to be together.
Yeah, essentially he says Alan died because he loved Charlie.
That's absolutely ridiculous. So that made Charlie very upset, and then Thomas and him got into a fight, and then Thomas finally just went off. And then as Ellie shows up again at the house, then Charlie and Ellie get into, a clash of argument with one another, even though Charlie loves his daughter, and he gives her the essay for school. And when she returns, after failing her essay, she realizes, or I should say Charlie explains to her, that she needs to look at the essay as he's dying. He says, take a look at the essay. And she's like, why would I do that? Why do I even need to look at it? Like any one of us teenagers would do. Why should I read my work? Why should I look at that? And when she finally looks at it, she sees that it was a paper that she wrote when she was in, was it when she was
like in middle school, like
middle school?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And the Moby Dick review.
It was the Moby Dick paper that Charlie has been reciting for the entire film. And so that's when we realized that, oh my gosh, Ellie wrote that Moby Dick paper that Charlie's been obsessed with this entire time. And I think it's so interesting to just see the connection that Charlie has been obsessed with that Moby Dick paper this entire time. Honestly, I thought that Moby Dick paper was just one of his...
I thought it was something he wrote as a kid or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know exactly where that Moby Dick paper came from, but when it's
his daughter.
Yeah, when
he loves her.
It's his daughter's paper. It's like, wow, this really connects a lot of things. And to think now that it was a paper that his daughter wrote, and to think of all of the times that they are talking to one another, and he's trying to tell her, you are such a wonderful writer, like you are amazing. And it's probably because he's just got that Moby Dick paper embedded in his mind. And he's
every
like,
dad thinks his daughter's amazing. So.
Well, yes, but the fact that he is an English teacher and he's obsessing over that Moby Dick paper because that's really the only piece of his daughter that he's had with him in his house this entire time.
Right, that's why he's obsessed with it. It's the one thing he has of her.
So, I mean, it's two things combined. It would be like if I was a music teacher and, if I had a kid that was that I had no contact with, and then they turned out to be a musician and they wrote a song, and then I had the one song from them just on, a digital player or something in my house.
Listening to it all the time.
And then 9 years later or something, they come over and they're like, what the hell are you doing over here? Like, bleh, bleh, bleh. And then I'm just like, you are so talented. Like, you can do so much. And they're like, I want you to record all my music for me. And I'm just like, but you are so good. And they're like, what are you even talking about, man? Like, it's the same thing.
Yeah. And the ending is just, so she's reading it to him and he stands up and walks towards her and there's a white light. Interpreted as he dies listening to her reading, the piece of work that he was so dedicated and obsessed with. And
that's an interpretation, though, because I did see online that there's a couple ways you can kind of look at this ending. And through an article from LA Times, they're kind of looking at this a couple different ways. So from the LA Times, they're saying that the final flashback scene, or however you want to look at it.
Well, because it flashes back and shows him like on the beach with her.
Exactly.
When they're younger.
So that scene apparently was a surprise to Samuel D. Hunter. He wasn't expecting that scene the way it ends, because in the play, what apparently ends in the play's performance is a final breath from Charlie, and then the lights cut
to black.
And that's how the play would end. And so it's kind of up to your interpretation how you see all of that happen. If that last breath is like his last breath, or if it's like that breath is kind of like like a
him and his daughter have reconnected. And
so from the LA Times, it's really, whether Charlie dies at the end of The Whale up for debate. As written in Hunter's script, as I was saying, the light snaps to black after the last breath, but it could be his last inhale at the end of the movie. But another way to interpret it, as mentioned from another person that had worked on the stage play, was saying it could also be considered in a metaphorical way, mimicking how whales immerse themselves for so long underwater and then they finally come up to the surface, or a deep intake of breath before diving in somewhere they've never gone before.
Interesting. I interpreted it in that he died.
So
sad, but that's the way I took it.
Yeah, it's all up for interpretation.
Yeah. After that sad note, some interesting facts of the movie, some fun facts. This was Aronofsky's first digitally shot film.
Interesting.
Yes.
He's a film man prior to this?
I guess so. And to play Charlie, Fraser would have to spend 4 hours each day in makeup to get all of the like prosthetics and the body put on. And it weighed like hundreds of pounds. So the Fraser struggling to move and to walk was not acting. Like the prosthetics and all of the makeup and stuff on him like really were toiling and like hard for his body. And Fraser in interviews was just talking about how after he would have it taken off, he would get this sense of vertigo, right? Because then he's like, it's like sea legs, like walking on land again, and you're kind of back into your normal body. And he was talking about how it gave him such an appreciation for people that are dealing with being, obese, and just how strong they are, because like that toll that it does take on your body.
Mm-hmm. I can
imagine. I found interesting. Also, Fraser got a 6-minute standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival following this
Wow.
movie, which is well deserved. I mean, Brendan Fraser, he's been kind of out of the limelight, the spotlight for a while. He was dealing with some things. And I feel like this is kind of his comeback, right? He was in No Sudden Moves and now he's in this. And he's such a good actor. Like, as I said earlier, he plays this role so well. And he's such a genuine human being, it seems like, that I'm excited to see what else he does after this now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and looking at some of the reviews for this film,
Not good.
Yeah, curious to see what's going on here, because on Rotten Tomatoes, 66% from critics, but a 92% from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And critics, what's going on here with you guys? Because the audience, they're having a good time watching this movie, and the critics are all saying they're not liking it. Not all of them, but a good handful.
So this movie has faced a lot of criticism. Mainly around what I was talking about earlier, and the idea that they're showing being obese as like a spectacle. And so I think a lot of the critics are kind of following along that line and saying that this is spectacle over substance. You know, that they're just like the scenes where he's eating and we just see his like sweaty body, and you know, like they're using his obesity as like a monster and not really looking at like the person. And there's this really interesting paragraph from a review from the Collider, and I feel like it kind of encompasses like what all of these critics are saying. So I'll just kind of read bits of it. But essentially they're saying like, Aronofsky's intent is clear. Like, Charlie is shamed for being obese, for being gay, for being optimistic. And the film does nothing but place him in uncomfortable moments where he's humiliated and embarrassed. So again, like the idea of like putting him on display and seeing them as less than. So there has been a lot of criticism in that regard. And also the sense that, you know, they casted an normal actor instead of casting someone who actually is obese to play the role, you know. So again, like makeup and having that be what's creating this character. And so there's been a lot of criticism in that regard, and Fraser has like talked about it. He hasn't shied away from it, and he has been very vocal about how he feels about this movie and the role to him and what it's meant. But at the same time, there is all that criticism, and I think critics are kind of following along that line and seeing it more as spectacle over substance.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure where to fall
I know,
on that,
I don't either. Like, I get it. I get both sides, you know? Yeah. I can see the criticism. I get it. But at the same time, I see the humanity in the movie, and I see like the realism and what's happening, and people who are obese and what they have to deal with. Like, I see both sides of it. So it's hard for me also to kind of comment on this, because I'm like, I don't know which way I lean. I don't know what side I agree with. But I think audiences typically don't feel that way. And that's why like the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is higher, because they're just seeing it for the surface of what it is, like an emotional look at a man and relationships he has in his life. And yeah, so it's interesting. It's definitely I don't know, it'll be interesting to see kind of how people feel about this movie maybe in like a few years or something, if feelings change.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, for the critics' score to be low for the reasons that you're explaining, I would want to say that like I'm seeing more of the, like, personally, I feel that I see more of the opposite side of the spectrum, simply because like I'm looking at this in like the psychological spectrum, where it's kind of like I watched the movie thinking like I see Brendan Fraser's character that he's playing, Charlie, and I'm seeing like the other characters are coming in and they're putting him through this emotional roller coaster. And where is the issue in that? Like, from my perspective, like I'm not seeing any issue with the roller coaster that they're running him through. necessarily. It's just like that's what the film's about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how I see it, at least.
I think it's to each their own, right? Like even the review from Roger Ebert, it only gave it 1.5 stars. And the sentence that I again pulled out from that review is just that. So they say the overall vibe is one of morbid fascination for this mountain of a man. The message the whale sends us home with seems to be, thank God that's not us. So again, I think critics are just kind of seeing it as this spectacle versus the relationships, which is what I focused on. Like I was more, he could have been skinny, you know what I mean? And like I feel like the relationships and like the dichotomy between that would still be what I focused on.
Right. I mean, the movie is about the relationship between him and all the supporting characters. But I mean, clearly he's trying to get with his daughter. That's what you're trying to figure out as the movie progresses. But also, as you watch the movie and you see in the lower right hand corner the days countdown, you're on the edge of your seat trying to figure out, like, is he gonna go to a hospital? Is he going to
get Ellie help? Gonna like forgive him?
Yeah. Is Ellie gonna forgive him? Is he like? It's not necessarily. I don't want to call it a spectacle. It's just I want to say, like, is he gonna like get help for what he's going through? Yeah. Because it's like. He's clearly going through some problems. He's got congestive heart failure. That's what they say in the movie. So that's what I'll say as what the movie's about. Basically, the nurse is saying he's got congestive heart failure. He needs to get help. And it's really like, I hate that they call it a spectacle.
Well, it's because of the scenes, right? Where he takes off his shirt and he walks through his house and we're like, forced to look at his body, and the scene where he's just like scarfing down candy bars, the scene where he's scarfing down 2 whole pizzas, you know what I mean? Like I think the reasoning is there's those focus on those scenes where we see it in this like horrific manner, and that's the spectacle that they're saying Aronofsky is kind of leaning towards. I agree with you. Like I said, you and I both, I think I see both sides, and I get why critics feel that way, but at the same time I get why I don't necessarily feel that way. It's hard. It's interesting. I think maybe I need to sit on it more, see it again. I don't know. Read more reviews. Most reviews though are the same. They don't like it, but they say that Brendan Fraser and like Hong Chow and their performances are great. So all the critics kind of fall in the same boat.
Yeah. I think my curiosity as they had like the countdown of days really was me thinking, is he gonna make it past the weekend?
Yeah.
Or is he just gonna go out on the weekend? And then we keep having his daughter show up at his house. And then with that happening, it's like, I wonder how their relationship's going to turn out. I'm really curious to see how that goes. And then we have other supporting characters like Liz and, Thomas showing up. And it's like, how is this really going to reel through? Like, with those coming in and out.
I mean, you have to remember, too, it's an Aronofsky film. Like,
exactly.
It's his thing, right? Like, think of Black Swan. Think of Mother. And all the other movies to me. Yeah, Requiem. Like, this is definitely his thing. Like
although I had the distaste with the term spectacle, that's what he makes. He makes spectacles. He makes
glasses.
Exactly. No, things to look at. Things you use spectacles for.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I'd say it's time for the slurps up or slurps down section of our episode. Slurps up meaning we recommend you check this movie out. We think it's worth watching, and we think that you should definitely take a look at it. Slurps down meaning we don't think that it is worth seeing. We do not recommend it, and we think that you should avoid it. Laura, slurps up or slurps down?
I think at the end of the day, I give this a slurps up. If go see it only for Brendan Fraser. He deserves it. He deserves all the recognition and all the love. That man is a saint. And I'm like I said, I'm excited to see what else he does. But also like Hung Chao, Sadie Sink, they're all of their performances are really great. And I think it's a really good look into people's lives and relationships and how people deal with trauma and addiction. And yeah, I cried. I mean, I won't lie. Like I cry in everything, but I definitely cried in this. And I would suggest it. I would suggest it. I think people should go watch it. What about you, Adam? Are you up also?
I am certainly going to give this movie a slurps up. I definitely think this movie was a great change of pace from all the standard types of movies that you would catch in a movie theater, the things you normally expect, like your standard action movie.
I'm tired of action movies.
Your normal drama film, your, out of left field Netflix comedy special. You heard me say it. I am so happy to see something that's a nice change of pace, and I think it was great that this is a movie from Darren Aronofsky. I haven't seen him put out a movie in quite some time, and it's nice that it's a film with Brendan Fraser with some clear dramatic content that is something that I think is something real, honestly. It is something that is face value, that is something I think we can all watch and really understand. And it's something that I'll really remember, honestly. Mm-hmm. And there's movies that I think we can all watch and turn the TV off and then wonder, what did I even just watch in that last moment? And this is not one of those. This is one where I've went to the theater, walked out, and thought that was something that's going to stick with me. I'm not going to forget this movie. And I think it came with a lot of the actor and actresses' performances. And yeah, I think it's very much one I would recommend checking out, definitely. And with that being said, that wraps it up for this episode of Screen Slurps. Be sure to follow us on social media at Screen Slurps on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And be sure to listen to us on Spotify, Ghana, or any other podcast streaming service out there. And if you enjoy what you hear, slide on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. It will help us a lot. And if there's any crazy movies that you want to hear about, let us know. Leave a comment on one of our social media pages, and trust me when I say we will be sure to talk about it. So closing out, I'm Adam Meisner.
And I'm Laura Herlocker.
Slurps up, and we will catch you later.
Later. Go watch The Mummy.